Okay, let's get this Q&A finished up. Sorry it's taken so long, people. It's been a crazy few weeks here. I guess it kind of all started with a disk crash, and let me tell you something, a hard drive crash is no fun, even when you do have good backups. So, you gotta buy the hard drive, and then you gotta restore it, and that took me out for a few days. And then I got some sort of sinus infection or something like that, which wasn't too bad in and of itself, except I couldn't talk for like a week and a bit, and finally got the podcast going again. I had to take a week off from the podcast for that, so that got over with, and I'm like, okay, I can start doing videos again, and then guess what? I get rear-ended by a moron who wasn't looking where she was going, and I'm okay, I'm not hurt, but I got all this bureaucratic mess about trying to get my car fixed and insurance and all that great stuff, so yeah. Yeah, that's the time I've been having lately, but I should be back. I should be getting back into this, so I'll get this Q&A finished up, and I've also got a couple of videos. Libertarianist and I are putting the finishing touches on our scripts for the last couple of Thunderfoot videos that he's done about the Hyperloop, and I know a lot of you like those, so please keep an eye out for those. And I should be back to regular podcasts and Lord Killian videos and things like that. And of course, as usual, if you've got anything you want to see me do and all of that, please put it down in the comments and I'll take a look at it. So, all right, let's get the rest of these questions out of the way. I think we just did the Kurzweil question last time. So the next one is, how do you respond to those who say the government created the internet? Let's think of an analogy. Let's say, and I've used this analogy before in other videos, that the Wright brothers ended up having some kind of family emergency and had to go back to Ohio and weren't able to complete their work on the airplane or something like that, which let the Smithsonian come in and do it because the Smithsonian, like a lot of others, were working on this problem. And so let's say the Smithsonian happened to be the one to do it. They'll be, well, the government created airplanes. Well, but that doesn't mean that we had to have government created, because the implication here is without government, we wouldn't have the internet. That's crap, people. That is crap. We would have the internet and it would likely be a lot better than it is. I've mentioned this before too, but there were a lot of protocols in the 70s that people were trying to use. But the government said, no, you have to use this protocol that ARPA developed because that's one government did, so we'll make that the standard. Now, of course, you could use whatever you wanted to on your own networks, but if you wanted to go over the packet switching network, you had to use theirs, which was TCP/IP. To keep the technical mumbo-jumbo down to a minimum, networks work on a layered architecture so that no one layer needs to worry about any other things that are going on. And in a network, of course, you've got packets that are hopping from one place to the next, one router to the next. So you've got a network layer that makes all of that happen. And then you have a transport layer, which makes it look like it's a single end-to-end connection. So your applications, which operate above the transport layer, don't need to worry about how packets are routed around. They can just act as though it's a single connection, which is good. But what others were developing at the time that DARPA didn't use was something called the OSI model, where between the transport and the application layers, you also have the session and presentation layers. Presentation is things like dealing with how different computers display different things. So think about ASCII versus ANSI versus now we have Unicode, things like that. So the idea is you'd have one standard way of communicating, and then just at the ends, you translated whatever the computer was doing. And the main event, the one I really want to talk about, is the session layer. Because the session layer is where things like authentication and encryption take place. And so that's really important because that's how you prove you are what you say you are. In the DARPA model, the DoD model, the one that TCP/IP was made on, all of that's the same thing. So like email, you just say who you are. Yes, I'm president at whitehouse.gov and send it out, and it just believes you. Because there's not a separate session layer. So, I mean, if they had done it properly the way everyone else was doing it at the time, we wouldn't have spam. Because everything would have to be authenticated, which means that when you send out an email, that had to be your email address. You couldn't pretend to be someone else. So things like spam, email viruses, stuff like that wouldn't have happened. Wouldn't have happened at all. We'd also have good encryption, Because even if there weren't that many good encryption options at the time, if you have a separate session layer, you can always add it in as a new session layer protocol. And then the applications don't have to worry about it. Your web browser wouldn't have to worry about certificates and crap like that to try to get it to work. All of this stuff has been stuck on into a model that was never built for it, because when DARPA made this protocol, it was like just a small group of 20-some people, all of whom knew each other. They all worked together well. They just needed to communicate with each other, so everyone on there, of course, was going to be a good actor. No one was going to spam anyone else. No one was going to send anyone any malware. So they didn't need anything like that, but the people who were operating more in the real world and the business world, where you had to do things like keep financial data secret and things like that. And you had to say, okay, different users can do different things on the network. They had different needs, and those would have translated much better to the modern internet than the DoD model. So, yeah, without government, we would still have the internet. It just wouldn't be as crappy as it is. Think about the Trabant. For those of you who don't know what that is, that's Trabant. That was an East German automobile. The wonders of communist technology. This is the wonderful thing that socialism can do. And they made this car for 30 years. Look at the first model of the Trabant, and then look at the latest one in like 1990, 91, whenever the last one was. From like the 50s to the 90s. It didn't change. It didn't change. No one improved, and there were a lot of improvements. It wasn't like it was a perfect car. People were saying it was uncomfortable, it was slow, it was noisy. And I mean, there were just stupid things that it did because, you had to put the gas in, then you had to put the oil in, then you had to mix the gas and the oil. The way you mixed the gas and the oil together was you closed the hood, and then you shook the car. You leaned against the side of the car where the hood is with your body and just shook it back and forth to mix the gas and the oil. Yeah, that's the kind of thing the government gives you. Free market gives you the Tesla Model S. So, yeah. All right. Roberto Rodriguez asks, what's your view on Libertarian Christians? Well, I gotta say I like them a lot better than statist atheists. Because when I started making atheism and libertarianism, I was really going after both groups. I wanted to speak to libertarian Christians and try to get them more over on the atheism side, and I wanted to speak to stateists and get them more on the libertarian side. I didn't predict this, but I got far, far, far better feedback from libertarian Christians than I did from my fellow skeptics, who just want to turn it all off when it comes to politics. So really, yeah, I mean, it's the same format and I have the same goals, but I'm really, really trying to put it to the stateists, which is also the reason for how to argue for statism. I mean, how often do you see that? Someone begging the other side to at least try to come up with rational arguments for what you believe in. So I don't really have a problem with libertarian Christians because they don't really want to force their way onto others. As long as they're not spreading around misinformation like the Earth is 6,000 years old or whatever, I'm cool with it. Golden Champion 3000 asks, will you ever do a video with Sargon of Akkad, Mr. Dapperton, and other skeptics on YouTube? I'd like to. Dapperton and I keep talking about how we need to do a collaboration someday. We just haven't really come up with a subject to do it on or whatever, but I'm sure something like that will happen. Sargon, I don't know about. I don't think he likes me very much. Can't think why. All right, David Hoffman. Hi, Shane. I've been an atheist for about 3 years ago. One thing I noticed since the beginning was that almost all of the atheists on YouTube are liberal and support abortion. I don't think they support abortion. I think they support abortion rights, which is a different thing. In the last 3 years, I've only encountered 2 atheists on YouTube that are conservative. 3 if you consider yourself conservative. I don't. So my question for you, if you are one, I'm not. Do you consider yourself conservative? No. And 2, what mechanisms do you think would explain the vast majority of atheists, at least the vocal ones, being liberal? If atheists come from all walks of life, and most in the U.S. reform are theists, then why do they all seem to end up liberal? Thanks. I think it's probably the fact that in the 1980s, conservatism got commingled with religious fanaticism thanks to the moral majority, Ed Meese, Jerry Falwell, and all that crowd. Whereas before it was the other way around. It was the Democrats who were the religious nut jobs that were doing things like filibustering the Civil Rights Act and things like that. And it was the Republicans who were kind of the voice of reason. But you're talking about people who generally weren't alive at that time and don't really remember that being the case. So in their minds, they equate conservatism with religious fanaticism, which is ridiculous, but I encounter it all the time. They're like, oh, you think minimum wage is bad? You're some kind of fundy then. You think the earth is 6,000 years old. It's like, what? No, I just understand economics. So I think that's what it is. When they rebelled against their religion, they rebelled against conservatism as well without realizing the horrendous mistake they were making. And they've just kind of dug their heels in on it, and they're just almost impossible to talk to about it. It's a shame, but that seems to be how it happened. Golden Champion 3000 again. What do you think about these teachers' unions that are predominantly for public schools? I think they're predominantly for themselves is what it is, and they don't make money the more private schools there are, or charter schools, or any kind of school choice, so that's why they're against those. Even though they say, oh, look at Finland, look at Sweden, look at those school systems and the things they're doing. Okay, well, they all have school choice. Why don't we do that? Yeah, it kind of goes to what I was saying earlier. You want school choice and you want to teach kids the earth is 6,000 years old? Oh, shut up. He's got another couple of questions. Are you for or against the digitization of books, especially the textbooks for schools and colleges? I'm all for it, especially if we can get the price down. Geez, $150 for a textbook? Come on, that's not a market price for that. They have a captive audience. They have, okay, school, you have to get this textbook, especially if you can go to the state, especially a big state like Texas. Okay, standardize on this textbook. And it's one textbook from one publisher. Well, we gotta standardize these things, don't we? We can't have these crazy different things going on in different schools. What if kids move from one school to another and they don't know what's going on? The only way to do that, of course, is to have a monopoly and force people to spend hundreds of dollars for a book or a bunch of bytes that you download. So, hey, if you're a college student, pirate the things. I'm sorry, but they don't deserve the money. If this were a free market, I'd say, no, you really ought to pay them. You need to pay the content creators, but no. No, this is one of those things where I just say pirate the fuckers. Screw them. Screw them. Also, do you hate it when people make a big deal of something as if it will cure cancer, end world hunger, or bring world peace, even though it will do neither? Yeah, that's upsetting, isn't it? Especially when it's something like marijuana, which does have medical benefits. It won't cure cancer or any of the other wild claims they're doing, but there are plenty of good reasons to legalize marijuana and make it available medicinally. It has a lot of medicinal benefits. You don't have to make up a whole bunch of crap and say, hey, this will cure cancer. You don't need to do that. And that's what's so infuriating about it. They make up crap like this when they don't have to. And all it does is discredit the idea because now it's associated with all this alt-med crap. Yeah. All right, some guy I'm not going to try to pronounce. Recommendations for YouTubing setup, camera, microphone editing, and illustration software. Well, I'll tell you what I use. Maybe the same setup will work for you, and maybe it won't. Do your research, but these are not the things that absolutely everyone should use. They're just the stuff that I'm using at the moment. So the camera I'm using that you can see now in this latest set of quickies is the Sony FDR AX53/B. That's a really nice 4K video camcorder. I'm looking at it on Amazon right now, and it's $898. Maybe I'll stick a link to that down below. Really nice one. I also just upgraded my video card because that's good because you can do rendering a lot faster without having to do that. And I've really gone off of NVIDIA. There's so much to like about NVIDIA, but the annoyances were just so frustrating, all the bugs they had. And I remember when that was the problem with ATI cards, was the buggy drivers, and so I switched to NVIDIA, and now it's the other way around. Now, I guess AMD now has the ATI cards, but yeah. So what I got was the MSI Radeon RX 480 GDDR5 8GB Armor, not the gaming, the Armor, because that's more set up for things like video rendering and things like that. And I mean, having that nice, fast 8 gigabyte video card, that is nice. That is really nice. Okay, microphone. The microphone I'm using now, I've been using this for years. It is the Audio-Technica AT2020. It's the USB version. If I were to buy one right now, if I wanted a USB mic, I think I would get the Rode Podcaster. What I might get when I get the money is the Heil PR40. And that's not a USB mic, but Shure, S-H-U-R-E, makes a really good XLR to USB adapter. For doing video, when I do the quickies and stuff like that, I use the Rode VideoMic Pro, and I have that into a Tascam recorder, Tascam. I'll look for these on Amazon and get some links down there, and you can take a look at those, but I always record the audio separately. Editing, I've always loved Sony Vegas, although it's Magix Vegas now, version 14, and really it just keeps getting better and better all the time. If you want something free to play around with, take a look at DaVinci Resolve. There's a free version of that. And I mean, it's pretty much a full-featured editor, and I really got to say about Resolve, when it comes to color grading, there's none better. I said this before about Vegas, when it comes to audio mixing, there's none better, and audio is so important. But color's important too, so I mean, they all have their different strengths and weaknesses, but they do have the free version of DaVinci Resolve you can use, so check that out. Illustration software, for the most part, I just use Photoshop. I pay the $10 a month. I mean, God, that's not much. And it keeps it updated. And I mean, I've been using Photoshop, God, since what, 93 or something like that? I don't know. I've been using it a long time. Now, if you want the Bezier type of, where you draw all the curves and things like that and do like, EPS files and things like that. Adobe Illustrator is good. I mean, there's really none better than Adobe Illustrator. But if you want something free, I use Inkscape. Inkscape is fine. There's probably more of a learning curve with that. I think Illustrator is probably easier to use, but Inkscape is good, and it works directly with SVG files, which is kind of like a modern standard for that. So that's what I use. All right, Travis Retriever, what made you choose the design for Lord Killian that you did? Was it inspired by that one SJW question where the guy talked about anti-SJWs and our thing for skulls? No, it wasn't. And believe it or not, it was not inspired by the Doctor Who episode Silence in the Library. Hey, who turned out the lights? The skeleton in the spacesuit. It was actually something the artist had done that Dapperton pointed me to. It was a picture of a skeleton out in space in a spacesuit smoking a cigarette. There were really two things I didn't like about that. One was the cigarette. I'm pretty much an avid anti-smoker. I would never ban it, but geez, come on. People, are you smoking nowadays? Okay, if you're a smoker and you're addicted, I can sympathize with that. Why on earth would anyone in this day and age start smoking? That baffles me. No clue. God, don't be stupid. Don't start, idiots. So that's one thing I didn't like. The other thing I didn't like about it was kind of dark, It was almost like a photorealistic skull and all that. And so for Lord Killian, I wanted kind of a Jack Skellington type of thing, where you had not really the eyebrows, but those ridges for eyebrows that could, morph and move around and things like that. So that's what I did with discussions between me and the artist and Dapperton, and Big Dicko had some input into that as well. So that's how all that came about. Golden Champion 3000 again with another couple. Do you think it's asinine and idiotic that the parents of the jump through hoops to get their kids into private schools? That's not very grammatical, but I think I get what he's asking. Yeah, I mean, parents want their kids to go to the best school possible. Why wouldn't they? What kind of dumb, awful parent would you be if you didn't want your kid to go to absolutely the best school? And the reason why they're jumping through all these hoops to get into private schools is because we don't have school choice with the public school. I'm fortunate we've got a good charter school here. And this is also why I'm not really all that interested in, look overall countrywide at how much better private and charter schools do than government schools. I'm not really interested in that because parents don't care about that. As a parent, I don't care what schools are doing nationwide. I care about the schools in my area. And in my area, there are two phenomenally good schools. One is the charter school, and the other is a school my niece went to, North Lincoln High School. Excellent school. every bit as good as the charter school for different reasons. I mean, they both have their different strengths and weaknesses, but on the whole, they're pretty much about the same. The problem is, I can't send my kids to North Lincoln. They don't give me that choice. I have to send them to East Lincoln, which is my alma mater, but it's not that good a school. I mean, it's not terrible. If it was the only school available, well, I could work with that, but it's really nice to be able to say, yeah, the charter school's better. I'm going to send them there. It would be even better to say, hey, maybe I could send them to North Lincoln too. To be able to have that level of choice like they have in Finland, like they have in Sweden, like they have in pretty much every other country on the planet. Yeah, so, that's why they do that. And that's why we should do everything we can, like educational tax credits and stuff like that, to make it easier for parents who aren't filthy rich to have good school choice for their kids and to have the same opportunities for them in private schools that the rich kids do. And one more for Golden Champion 3000. Who or what inspired you to be an open-minded, down-to-earth, humble individual? Not exactly sure, because, it's kind of a lifelong thing. So, I guess my parents, they were very good at inspiring me to be that way. There was also all of the pop culture that I was watching, like Star Trek and Doctor Who and things like that. And then when I got into reading science fiction, like Robert Heinlein, and even science fact, like Carl Sagan, watching the Cosmos series and then getting the book that goes along with it. I think if you're just being an honest seeker, that's the only place you can end up being. Because there's so many things that we don't know that we can't know. We can't know anything for 100%. There always has to be an avenue for saying, okay, there's a certain amount of evidence that would show me to be wrong about this. It might have to be a huge mountain of evidence, but it could happen. There might not be any real chance of it. I've got so many quickies in the can. I don't remember if I've put this up there, but the basic idea is, but there's still a chance, right? It's kind of like when they were talking about Bitcoin addresses and the possibility of two people just by chance making the same Bitcoin address. And people were saying things like, okay, well, if you have this, big gay pile of people and they're each creating one Bitcoin address a second, then you need a big gay pile of people the size of the sun. And then you'd need, 20 billion such piles. And you have to do it throughout the lifespan of 7 universes. And then 2 of them somewhere might create the same address or something like that. I forget what the thing was, but it was pretty funny, the big pile of people. And of course, long before you get to that pile of people, their gravity pulls everyone in. They become a black hole. So yeah, you're not going to have a big gay pile of people big enough to do that. And then people say that and they say, but there's still a chance. Well, not really. If it's going to take the lifespan of several thousand universes for it to happen, and we wouldn't expect it to happen even once in the lifespan of our universe, I pretty much accept that as a definition of impossible. At least practically, if not absolutely. So. All right, Nicholas Stout, what are your views on private prisons? No such thing. No such thing. Private prisons... We have private prisons the way we have private roads. Okay? Yes, government pays private companies to build roads. That doesn't mean they're private roads. Government pays private companies to run prisons. That doesn't mean they're private prisons. It's still government setting the rules. In fact, I think the federal government still has oversight over all private prisons. They make the rules. They pass the laws that people violate when they get sent to those prisons. So, no such thing. No such thing. It's a complete lie. A private prison would be something you'd have like in an ANCAP system, where, hey, he tried to kidnap my daughter or kill her or whatever, so we're going to put him in a place. Bob Murphy calls them hotels. He's got a nice little video speculating about this kind of thing. But the idea is, and there's something like this in the probability brooch as well. So, you imprison him there, and then he pays for it. It's coming out of his nickel. And if he doesn't have the money, he's just going into debt doing it. But if he's found not guilty, he recovers with interest. So, something like that would be a private prison. David Hoffman, what is your stance on abortion? Morally, I'm against it. I'm sorry, that is a human being in there. But as a practical matter and as a legal matter, keep the government out of it. Government shouldn't ban it, shouldn't fund it, shouldn't do anything. Stay out of it. And we'll work out the rest. Charzer says, I loved your Lord Killian videos. It was what introduced me to your channel. I also got into your videos on economics. They're very helpful and informative. Thank you. You're welcome. And I really like how people are coming for the Lord Killian videos, but also staying to watch the economics videos and atheism and libertarianism and how to argue for statism and things like that. I would like to ask you, what made you a libertarian and how did you get there? And it's kind of like before. It was kind of a lifelong thing. My parents weren't exactly libertarians, but they were pretty much free thinkers, and they were pretty much skeptical of pretty much both parties. And also, if you watch Doctor Who, as I did growing up, there was a fairly strong libertarian theme going through that show, as opposed to Star Trek, which is pretty much socialism. Well, the original Star Trek pretty much wasn't. It wasn't really until you get into the next generation that they hit socialism hard and heavy. The kind of socialist-seeming elements of the original series are really just because of the fact that it's a military ship, so they're taking their orders from Starfleet and things like that. But they did use things like money, Kirk would say, Scotty, you earned your pay for the week, and things like that. But it was probably really when I started reading Robert Heinlein and things like that. But it was a slow. I'm actually kind of embarrassed when I think back at how long it took. But it's kind of the same thing about how I became an atheist, because I spent so much time like, oh, okay, well, let's see if Noah's Ark could be possible. And then you start looking at that and, okay, well, I guess Noah's Ark. Well, what about this part? What about that part? And what you're doing is you're pruning the branches. You're not really striking the root. Striking the root would be, is there any good reason to believe that any kind of God exists, or even anything supernatural exists? And if the answer to that is no, then the rest of it goes with it. And you don't need to ask, how feasible is Noah's Ark? Well, it's the same thing politically. Because I was never convinced about things like gun control or the war on drugs or anything like that. So I never really fit into one category or the other, but it was like I just said, having to prune at the branches. Oh, well, okay, this doesn't make any sense, that doesn't make any sense. Really, the last one was the Americans with Disabilities Act, because I really liked the idea of that when it came out. And then I saw what it was like, and I was like, oh, okay, it's a good idea, but when you put it into practice, there's all these unintended consequences that have kind of the opposite effect. Well, gee, if that can happen with things like disabled people, how can there be anything that sort of thing couldn't happen with? So that started getting me striking at the root, which is saying, is there any really good need for government? So that was really what did it. So that'll get it finished up, and good timing too, because you can probably tell my voice is about to go again. So thanks for all the questions, everyone. As always, stay strong and be free.